Good afternoon. This is one of the very interesting sharing of the story and the novel, one of the top most popular Chinese novel in history, in Chinese history, about the monkey or the Monkey King. And I have put much of my emphasis onto my personal Facebook platform called the Monkey. Why is this so um, so much personalized? By a man of my age, I was born in 48, and I have also been posting and creating writing in the different platforms with my own website of www.paulyih, which is PAULYIH.ai. And one of the platforms what I have written is about the monkey. The reason for me to do that is because other than the fact that I have created from the same website, the CCI, the Cross Cultural Institute, some 40 years ago, and some also 45, 50 years ago, when I was finishing my master's degree in Wisconsin, I created a communication system called the 3Cs. And 50 years later, I am restarting what I had started. And in this 50 years, with the global travel and me commanding 5+ languages, 3 dialects in Chinese, where I'm still read and write Chinese, even I left China, Macau, and Hong Kong in 1962, age 14. My family moved to Brazil. From Brazil, I finished my junior high school, and then college here in the U.S. and remain to be here in Wisconsin. But in the last 45 years, my life was very richly engaged with the global gemstones and minerals, but the terrain and my resources have always been involved with Brazil. First of all, to speak a little bit of my background, there will be other videos you are welcome to visit when I'm speaking of be the subject matter involving the various program called the Gem File, which is interesting, jumping from the simple beginning of a business, retail, into the global distribution. And from the time frame, 1977, now we are into all the digital age of AI and how to use AI and how to use the big data, the big storage now, and most importantly, with the use of the quantum speed, the quantum computation, and tabulation. So in this spectrum in life, and I would like to remind all of you, if this is a live example, for the most part of my life, by doing what many people think is audacious, or risking traveling to the many the regions of Brazil and engage willingly for my forever curiosity since I was a teenage, finishing school in Brazil with the Salesians order, Roman Catholic order, and their very committed work in the region of Mato Grosso with the Chavantes, with one of the Brazilian native tribes. In my lifetime, but at the beginning of my finishing my junior high, going to high school, our junior high in Brazil was 4 years, so it was like my freshman year. I wanted to join the religious order, to be a seminarian, not so much about my own personal religiosity or the subject matter with God. Nevertheless, my engagement since 1965, 66, in that time and period, that I have always loved the way I grew up in Brazil, and my curiosity with the Brazilian culture and the enrichment where I have learned my Portuguese with the support of the other support system, with the educational system I got from the Salesians with the Latin and Greek. Well, Latin, we're learning to serve Mass, but the singing of the Greek Gregorians had allowed me to open my mouth and learn better of the language in Portuguese, and crossing over by the series of exposure. So from Portuguese to Spanish, from Spanish to Italian, and my father went to school in Sorbonne. My exposure of some of the French, I can read French in the modern era. But what I would like to take this particular time, um, when 2 weeks ago, when one of the hardest um, game, first time ever created, even sanctioned by the Chinese government, is the Wukong, or the myth, or the black myth. The reason for me to take on more about my storytelling about the monkey, also known as a monkey king, is that I know growing up in the 60s, in the 50s in Macau, the world was basically all torn into pieces, destroyed, with Chinese civil war between the nationalist China from Taiwan, Chiang Kai-shek, and the Mao regime in China. Many of us had already suffering the various cultural dissonance, I will label, to make a demarcation of the opium wars. I have no qualm to call it the opium holocaust. Along with the open holocaust to be labeled as such, and the many diaspora of the Chinese fleeing from war since the time of the Song dynasty. And from the Song coming to the Mongols, have pushed other Chinese further, leaving the Yellow River region further south to the Yangtze, to the region today. Talk about Shanghai, Jiangsu, and the province Zhejiang. Anyway, it's by the both sides of the river Yangtze. This is where my father's origin is from. My mother is Cantonese, but also born and raised in Guangxi, the province west of us. So I'm born in a household with the multiple language dialect, and my father was a Sorbonne graduate, had gone to France, came back, and helped China during the war with Japan in the use of his French. But to make it all, try to simplify as much as I can, and I will be producing and writing at this point about a couple of topics that you may find it interesting eventually. Um, I am talking about, I started to write in the full assistance in my use of the ChatGPT, is about the pedagogy of conscience. The subject of conscience that I am now raising, that will be a book less than 200 pages, produced in less than 2 weeks. Now it's being edited. And it's not for any other purposes other than to show how the new era, the new technology, in all the questions I raised about the conscience, comes in some of the sequence. First, I grew up in Brazil, learning, studying, discovering about the Brazilians teacher philosopher who wrote about who wrote, and he used education, is the system called conscientization. And after much reflection of Paulo Freire from Brazil in the early 60s, who managed to educate many of the Brazilians illiterates just so they can have the ability to sign their name to vote. It sounds a little political because at that time, Paulo Freire also had his um, linkage with then the Brazilian liberation theologians. That's another story that I will eventually elaborate more how religious people, even me coming from the Catholic background by my baptismal in early on in Macau and my great association with the Roman Catholics in Brazil. But in that time and period, in 63 and 64, I was just finishing my junior high school. I'm aware of Paulo Freire, but not in detail. But later on, because of this one word, conscientization, and when I translate conscience from Portuguese into English and then to Chinese, and it just come up with two words, 良心, kind heart, or cultivation of the kindness of the human heart. But however, by this language of the conscientization, had put me in search of the conscience cultivation or the education of conscience or the awareness of conscience, where I found conscience cannot be taught. Conscience is the deepest inner level in us, be that you can call it a moral compass or be called your value system. Conscience is the deepest thinking in us, to think introspectively and to think reflectively, collectively, to think forward imagination. So conscience is the product of our human thinking. And I'm still defining that. And from that departure, I discover from my personal life, my father's village from the province Zhejiang, a city named Yuyao. Today is the suburb next to Ningbo, the known business city from Zhejiang. The thinking philosopher and also a government official named Wang Yangming from 1500. So from the search of the conscientization of Paulo Freire from Brazil to Wang Yangming to the Ming Dynasty, where he had managed to create his own research work, I credit him the confluence of the teaching of another 1,000 years ago from the teaching of Confucius and the teaching of Laozi's Tao, and the teaching of Buddha. As in Chinese, those three disciplines of education teaching, they were never religion. Here comes a huge discrepancy, a part of the cultural dissonance, how the West had labeled, how the West had done so erroneously by labeling the three disciplines in Chinese, be that by Buddha, by Lao Tzu, and by Confucius, into the terminology written as Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. That is because, for the most part, this going back by my statement about the miscalculation, the misunderstanding, gross misunderstanding of the Chinese. And we can talk about India and other Asian cultures ever since 1492. 1492 is the beginning of the Inquisition in Spain, and becoming also how Columbus had discovered America in the Caribbeans. And remember, 1492, 1500, Wang Yangming, there's an interesting time frame where the conquest by power of the West and propelling forward with the three of the last industrial revolutions. The Iberian nations of Portugal and Spain, from the logistical point of view, the Portuguese were early on already have found the continent of Brazil in 1460s. This is, again, many people would take whatever I say lightly. And also, Portuguese in fear of the power of Spain when Spain forcefully taken the island, the Canarias, the Canary Island. But Portuguese, by the Prince navigators in the 1450s, 60s, already had their discovery in most of the coast of West Africa, except they have never turned or the estimated current of the Cape, the Cape of Good Hope, eventually southern tip of Africa. On my travel as a teenager in 1962, we, on the way to 60 days from Hong Kong to Brazil, we stopped over, passing through, visit the city of Singapore, Penang, going through the Strait of Malacca into the Indian Ocean. Then we landed in the country named Mauritius, nearby Madagascar, and then eventually landed in East Africa, Mozambique at that time, and Maputo today, and coming down the South African coast from the Port Elizabeth, Durban, and then Cape Town, and crossing over from the Atlantic Ocean into Rio de Janeiro, eventually landed in Santos, is our port of entry. In between the Atlantics, our ship made a stop in the island called Tristan da Cunha, or Tristan da Cunha, is right in the midst of the Atlantics, because in that year, 1962, October, in around that time, those volcanic islands are vanishing, and our mission is to pick up three scientists. The last three scientists was on that island for observation and whatnot. So Tristan da Cunha become a very, very interesting name that I cannot forget. As I am reading the various novels about the identity of a Columbus, who were never Italian. He was born in a town called Cuba, and he is a bastard child between one of the counts Beja, in the region called Alentejo, and then his mother was the last name of a converted Jewish family by Zarco. Zarco is one of the pioneers of Portuguese ethnic Jews who had discovered the island of Madeira. So the Portuguese activity in the west coast of Africa, including the discovery of the Azores. One more point, what has consolidated my thinking? Again, all this can be totally challenged, disputed, and the more input, the more eventually sharing of the ideas, agree, disagree, challenge, will be fostering the same future learning in my use of the ChatGPT every day. So this can be very interesting. Also, I want to remind the audience of the Portuguese sea power, and not to forget all the major navigators, this talents of navigators. Let's start for the first one. Columbus from Cuba, Portuguese. The second one, Vasco da Gama, who went to Africa, eventually landed in Calcutta. Pedro Álvares Cabral, who discovered Brazil in 1500. And also in a later day, when everybody know about Magellan in a very anglicized name, and I often pity the names had directly changing some of the representation and status. Well, Magellan's name is Fernando Magalhães. He's also Portuguese and also hired by the Spanish court. And if you can remember, Magellan or Magalhães' trip navigating the first circumnavigation by finding his passages south of Argentina, crossing South America, and eventually by passing Guam. Guam used to call the Isla de los Ladrones in Spanish, means the island of the thieves. And eventually he landed into the island of the Philippines. He was killed in the Philippines. But his team eventually circumnavigate. His fleet went on back to Spain and back to Europe. So life is full of new discoveries. Our discovery today, reading history and reading my life passages and all this marvelous adventures, reflecting back to the story I'm sharing with you, is that since I was a child, 6, 7, 8 years old in Macau, my role model has become, and my role model even today for my entire life, with the event that had happened most adventurously in my gem trade in the jungles, in the Amazons and upper the Rio Negro, in the upper region, the northernmost part of Brazil, into the Solimões, into Rondônia, went into the Roosevelt reserves found by Teddy Roosevelt and his guide by name Colonel Rondon, Rondon. Now we have the province in Brazil called Rondônia, named after him, meeting up with the many ethnic minorities up north of the Tucanos, Baniva, Pare, and also the Yanomamis by the border between Brazil and Venezuela. In Rondônia, I met up the tribe named the Cintas Largas, meaning big belt. But it's interesting, I'm still discovering that this particular tribe, they using music is the basic communication. Now, this is just my personal latest discovery. But in all this travel, in all this audacity, by the suggestion, a hint of some stone being found and some possibilities, the huge, massive acreage of land, in order to help the natives not to damaging their environment, those open inside the jungle with open pampas without disturbing or harming the environment, those land can be used for agriculture. And one of the many possible land leasing between the Cintas Largas in Rondônia and also between the Yanomamis up north, a common interest could be the Chinese who are coming into the agriculture of Brazil and with the investment growing or planting or buying. So I am using this story of the Monkey King, which is the very first game China had produced in gaining wonderful momentum. By what I'm trying to do is to give my audience here in America as a general view of that importance. The Monkey King come up from the novel written in the Ming Dynasty, and the story actually of the journey to the West have taken place in the 7th century in the Tang Dynasty by the monk who at that time felt the influence of the teaching of the Buddhist values was a little bit chaotic. And he had decided to go into the West through Tibet and through the various countries today in the Central Asia, and eventually landed in India, and with him translating the language written either in Sanskrit or in other form of language in India, and brought it back to China in the era of the Tang Dynasty. But the novelist who wrote this book make it very, very much by me, as a very, very marvelous storytelling. In that era, in the 14th century, or even into the 12th century, the highly individualized talent and skill of this one monkey, which you already know the name is Wukong, and his complete name is called Sun Wukong. What I found interesting from my cross-cultural 5 languages, 3 dialects, and Chinese perspective, that where I have found the author were playing many of these writers trying to write reflecting on something of their time, either by cynicism or sarcasm or satire about the rules and the laws of the governance. But what I have found it interesting from my perspective, the monkey, first of all, was born out of rock. In the movie they made in Hong Kong a few years ago, they actually putting the monkey into clear crystal amethyst. Now, there's a little bit in association with my business. What I have become very much involving in my first round of investment is with the stone of amethyst. The monkey, after thousands of years of the sunlit moonlight, that's how China using the energy, had created the monkey, and one good old day he born out of the rocks. By naming him son, also means grandson in Chinese, Sun, Suanzi, like the Suanzi martial, the war rituals. The author had put the monkey into all of us. We are all the grandchildren of our culture. So Sun is his last name, meaning all Chinese are the monkey. The second name, Wu, is very much in my personal touch of the early part of the teaching of the Buddhistic values before the Tang Dynasty, coming in 400, in the era when the Buddhist monk Damo, he came south by the sea, by way of the Canton province, Guangdong today, and eventually that is where the part of the story of a Shaolin temple. But in that particular time and period, one of the best known character in the Chinese Buddhistic history is the sixth patriarch. He became the masters away from the grand masters of Damo, the Indian, who came to the region, faced 9 years to the wall, to the cavern. Eventually, he came on to passing on his teaching. And I'm very much influenced by this non-descriptive teaching of the Buddhistic values by the Tang monk. The monk, this Monkey King, were guiding, and he's his top disciple, to escort this monk to the West. Well, the story goes, I would tell more how the monkey was assigned to this mission with greatest reluctance, because before he became the follower or disciple of this Tang monk, which is absolutely total purity, the Monkey King had become the best of the warrior, the victorious or invictus monkey from all heaven and earth. So the Monkey King, by telling you his name, the second name, he's awakened. That's very much tied to the Zen. Also, his last name, no, his third name is Kong. Kong means empty. And somebody is awakened. He is totally empty from the human, the desires, gluttony, and ambition and whatnot. So I call Sun Wukong is my favorite Zen monkey. By the way, Zen is the Japanese for the Chinese Chen. But since in the last periods of the Chinese, I call it the diaspora and the traumatizing, the cultural dissonancing of the Chinese since the 1840s until the Chinese Republic become a nation in 1948. In this chaos, the West had not realized the Chinese name in Zen is called Chen, but it doesn't matter. In fact, I like the name, the sound of Zen. So the monkey is a Zen monkey. The author trying to put all this richness and with the greatest emphasis of the individuality, the individualism that we seldom have seen ever in the tradition of Chinese, in the writing of the many Chinese, with the exception, on the contrary, in 108, Marshmen, the bandits, that fought against the abusive imposition of the dynasty of that time. But the monk is very unique. The monkey born out of the rocks, and why he remained on this island east of China by name as Fa Guosan, the flower and the fruit mountain, among some all other monkeys. But he was in particular more of a interesting, because he, again, the author said he was not born out of any of the ordinary sets. So the author had already delinking the monkey to be extraordinary without that Chinese cultural, traditional, umbilical cord tying to the mom and dad, the parents, the grandparents, the rituals, the marriage. The monkey is absolutely free of this quote-unquote bondage by the culture. And one of the reasons how the monkey become the king, why they call him Monkey King, is because amongst all the other monkeys, in their playful way, searching for food, fighting against other intruders and whatnot, in one good given day, the monkey and the rest of the monkey were playfully by the waterfall. And by some of the comments, somebody mentioned that there might be a much greater place in existence on the other side, inside the waterfall. While everybody's talking, sharing, commenting, the monkey with the leap of faith, I'm highlighting this particular timing point, he jumped through the waterfall, landed into a brand new area that become the real name of the fruit and flower mountain, where they have abundance supply of food. They have the unending supply of all the good resources. And because of that leap of faith, the monkey become the king of all the monkeys. However, in whatever time frame, here comes of the hierarchy of incompetence. But in a good way, the monkey king got tired of his own statue. He became the king of the monkeys, and he became associated with all the other underling. Again, the Chinese culture, the heavenly are the gods, the earth, the middle is the human, and then down below are some of the ghostlings and monsters and demons, many of them because they were one time in heaven because of whatever crime they have committed or misgiving. They were sent down to the bottom, to the earth, below the human, and they can be very dangerous, and they can be having attacks and man-eating monsters, and they will have to redeem themselves by the various process, by the command of the gods from heaven to turn them around and returning back to heaven. This part of the mythology of that. And the Monkey King have decided on one given day, he was not happy with his own status quo. And he looked further out. He admired the humans. He admired the humans where they can learn and read and acquire different skills, and be the martial arts, fighting skills. And more magically, he had found out about another grandmaster who can teach both the skill, the magical part of it is that he can learn the skill to turn himself into 72 different kind of animals, beings. Well, in the story further, he turned himself into a temple, put his tail into a flag, and he had stolen the most important, the fruit of the immortality while he was serving in heaven. And that is the big peach, the holy peach party given by the queen of the Jade Buddha. When he was in heaven, after he beat all the other the dignities, the generals and the warriors, and the heavenly bureaucracy don't really know how to handle the monkey, because his dexterity, his skill, and his powerful, and with his magical wand that he can put into behind his ear traveling, and he can put one blow, that little needle can become the hundreds tons of a rat, that he literally beat the living daylights of most of the hierarchy of the military, the rank and files in heaven. But in order to capture him, to give him belonging to the heaven, well, they gave him a token job. He was become the stable boy. Take it back. He's become the stable official, just guarding the heavenly horses. At first, he was very content. So he's among all the other deity. But in one afternoon, while he was taking a nap, but he did not want to be caught taking a nap, he turned himself into a bee of sorts, animals, and resting on top of the branches. And when some of the fairy maidens from the queen of the Western Havens were talking about preparing an annual feast to use the peaches into nectar, and by drinking this nectar will give all the visitors their immortality. And after he find out, discover, wait a minute, how come I'm not on the invitation list? By him turning into a fly, follow the maids, and look at the list. The monkey was not on the list. He then turned mightily pissed. Next, he decided to do a trick, have all this maiden collecting peaches, falling asleep. In the meantime, he himself taken all the peach he can swallow and ate them all. Now imagine, he is now a monkey, have immortality by taking not one, not two, but he ate all the peaches and drank all the nectars were preparing a few days from the day to the heavenly deity. And then the monkey has started his first offense. Eventually got caught. However, when they have decided to put him into an urn by the pharmaceutical deity in heaven to bore him down, to pulverize him. However, because of the nectar he took, or the peaches he was eaten, he cannot be destroyed. He busted open bricked up the entire urn, my visual in the comic books, and then he pick up his wand, and that's where and when he's starting beating the living daylights of all deities, not all these deities in military uniforms. So he become to be known as all victorious monkey in all heaven. His arrogance had brought to the attention when he can no longer be defeated, and he was called upon even to go to the Jade Buddha. Now, here's an interesting story. The Jade Buddha is part of a Chinese legend, mythology, maybe put in the context of the Tao section or the Chinese mythology. And then at the end, here comes the calling in for the big Buddha. And just imagine as a child that the big Buddha turned himself into a colossal, huge mountain and put up his palm, and by telling the monkey, come up to my palm. And monkey was very challenging, very arrogant. He was undefeated. So he took a somersault, landed onto the palm of the Jade Buddha. More than that, maybe this part of the story seldom told in a vivid form. He did a number one and a number two. He peed and pooped just to insult the big Buddha. Next, the big Buddha flipped his palm, buried him under the mountain named Five Fingers, and told him a few hundred years from now, there will be a monk going west in searching for Buddhistic scriptures. Maybe then you will be able to lift this curse written on the paper. Then that will be your next fate. And this is how the story of the monkey started. And then a part of the story, how the monk assigned himself to come out to the mission, heading west to Tibet, to the Central Asia, eventually gone south. Very, very difficult journey, a lot of hardship. But he was so pure of a monk, the heavenly gods, and in the frequency of the goddess of mercy, Kuan Yin, to continue to guide this monk to the west. And in and between, there were 4 disciples started with the Monkey King. And this is when and where the monk come into the mountain of 5 fingers, along with the monkey screaming out for help. And just before he finding out to lift, the curse is like a piece of paper written about the monkey. He has to remain in that particular mountain, or when the curse or some sort of symbolism lifted, and he'll be free. And then here's the goddess of mercy showed up, and also by making sure the monkey would not be overpowering the monk, the goddess of mercy had created a golden, I don't call it crown, it's a golden headpiece. And with a specific prayer saying for the monk, if the monkey ever disobey, if he ever got into trouble, the monk's prayer will have that golden ring and the monkey's head squeezing in. It's an interesting metaphor how the simple monk being empowered by the such item and blessed by the heavenly deity to safeguarding the monk by Monkey King. And then comes the other three disciples. All of them, once they were belong to the courts up in heaven, but by my whatever minor infraction, they were sent down to the earth or below earth in the lower level, and they were told sometime, someday, this monk will show up, and then he will be able to. If those three, including they want to free themselves to go back to heaven, they will have to do this particular deeds, follow the monk, safeguarding the monk, carrying luggages. So one of them is the dragon, the white dragon. It became the horse carrying the monk. The second one, which is a pig face, which is very interesting in the description of this interplay and the characteristics of the four disciples. The Monkey King basically only feed on fruit and rest always on the trees or watching over nearby of the party of five. And then the horse, just by my psychological interpretation, in a very mild manner and a very respected, obedient doing his task. The Sandman, which when they come to the river, the Sandman was devouring, eating. Is the river monster. Also, is another heavenly character got sent down to earth to pay for his misdeeds. Where when they were all subdued by the monkey and kneeling in front of the monk and paying their respects and to follow the monk, guarding the monk's journey. So the Sandman becomes almost like a carrying baggages, luggages, and whatever possessions for the group. In the meantime, the pig face is the symbolism of a one-time extremely lusty, extremely his gluttony. He loved food. He loved women. In many occasions, he was almost embraced by one of the villagers to take him on as the son-in-law for this elderly man's daughters. So in every occasion, the piggy, a man with a pig face, open chest, and big belly, and his weapon is a rake called the 9 dents or 9 teeth. The characteristics of this group of travelers were the tank monk, known to the underworld, that anybody takes a bite, he's like a morsel, they will also have immortality. And this is the basic story about the Monkey King. Yes, the monkey plays a huge part. He can travel 100,000 miles using whatever terms. And in split seconds, he can be back to his island. He can be up in heaven. He can smash his wand into the area land, which you will see some of this in the Black Myth. Then he will call for the earthly, the regional deity in a much more of an obedient or just information to tell them what is in the region. Or the monkey feeling there as a cloud carrying some kind of scent, some kind of demonic or monster scent, then he will call for the earthly deity and give him the report. Why is such smell? What is around the next valley and whatnot? The reason I want to highlight this extended comment about the Monkey King and his talent and his dexterity, his one-time arrogance in heaven, and now he, from his arrogance, got flipped and buried into this 5-finger mountain. And in many ways, it's a very, very strong moral history of us all. And I've taken particularly this time, number one, based on my cross-cultural experience from China to the West. And here I am, almost like I am the monkey. I am returning to the East, so to speak. But as a cross-cultural psychologist, as I'm in the field of psycholinguistics, okay, I think the West had their omissions by labeling the three basic Chinese teaching systems. None of them were religion. They were all about cultivating the inner awareness of our conscience. And maybe after 500 years, starting 1492, and with the West expansion and the Western economic power progression with the last three industrial revolutions, with the steam engine created in England, had defeated China and had India colonized. And the next evolution was the American evolution with the discovery from electricity to petroleum energy. And the third in our lifetime was the era of the internet and computer and the spreadsheets and software. And now in this particular fourth moment of the global technological evolution, China will be at parity in the sharing of all this development. And I hope we all have the chance to learn and to find out how this world can be shared and not to be locked into the concept, namely the American ideas, not being able to share the American supremacy in this last 75, 80 years. I lived through the time and period of the Monroe Doctrine. Americans speak of democracy, but exercise military change regimes with the American the School of America, starting with the Banana Republic, the military coup in Guatemala, 1954. We can see all these military regimes from Salvador, the cruelty of Salvador, and the massive killing in Guatemala of indigenous people, and then to the military regimes and influence in Peru. But 1973, the killing of Allende in Chile, and then the rest of the military regimes in Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia. The Monroe Doctrine is part of the American arrogance. The Monroe Doctrine, now we have to also look at the American idea of the zero-sum game. In other words, there can be no other people that can top the US, the American powerhouse hegemony. And that is another form of thinking and can antagonize the world and pushing us into more of a polarization. And to add to this segment also is the American exceptionalism. Remember well, the world all moving up after the last 75 years of Second World War. Nations put the money, put their gold, invest in the US. American influenced the world by the language. English is the lingua franca, just like Romans, the Latin language, had conquered the entire Iberia. I speak 4 languages, understanding French And all four language, I grouped them into called Romantina, or in my development of language packages with China called Romancina. But the Roman, later on in Italy, they have a time called the Renaissance, by the Italians looking for the past wisdoms of the Greeks. And we saw the beautiful enrichment of culture in the Renaissance. From Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Raffaello with the painting of the chapels and the building of the cathedrals, whatever. When are we going to have an American cultural renaissance? While we continue going to have exercise our military might, which again will continue to be challenged not just by one or two countries. Those countries who were defeated, harmed, bombed, devastated, like Russia, like Soviet Union, like China. Even China going through a period in the 60s before Henry Kissinger and Nixon signed Chinese on to creating the alliance to free up the Seventh Fleet, to going against the Soviet Union, and to spending money by the time of Reagan to outspend money in military competition. And in that time, why China and the Soviet Union have their skirmishes, it was because in that particular time in point, the Soviet Unions were also exercising an hegemony within the socialist state. Namely, at one time, the Soviet Union had told China, you are a satellite nation, just like Czechoslovakia or Poland. You handle agriculture. Mao Zedong refused to take on that prescription by the Russians, then the Soviet Unions. That squabble, that challenging between the sovereignty, independence of the Chinese within the entire cultural sphere of the socialist communist sphere is something that we have to look back. And living in America and to see some of those mindsets framed by the Monroe Doctrine, no country can come into the Americas, and by the zero-sum game, and by the American exceptionalism, and as of late is the neoliberalism. We're still trying to projecting our form of democracy onto others without these countries learning the process about democracy. I have written in different aspects, talk about economocracy. Economy and democracy will find a way to work hand in hand together. The world cannot learn about our democracy because we cannot force the world to learn English. Even English has been the lingua franca, like Latin, like the Romans. But to understand that we overlook the Chinese cultures were not shaped by religion. However, in the West, we talk about the Jewish origin of Judaism coming from the Roman Catholic background, the Roman Catholicism. Then came Luther's Protestantism. And in the culture of Islam, Islamism. This Western monotheist origin of the religion make the Western cultures projecting China's value system also into the religious ending, ISM. In this segment, what I'm trying to present the Monkey King is also to start to hope and wish the West can learn more about the East, and namely the Chinese. wishing you all have a good day and hope we can share more. So long. Pronto, Gustavo.